TV3. It is time for our business segment, which is brought to you by Peak Milk. Now, joining me this morning, we have Mr. Paul Frimpong. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. And our discussion in our business segment today is, well, Nigeria being, going up on the list, basically. Previously, we had been informed that South Africa was the largest African economy. Now it appears that Nigeria has emerged as the top of the list. So what we want to look at is the impact of this on Africa in general, but specifically on Ghana. First off, what do you think about the whole, or what's your perception as to why Nigeria has actually emerged as the top economy within Africa?
Yeah, actually, it's a mixed story, I must say. To some Nigerians, it's a good story. To others, it doesn't really add anything to their lives. Mm-hmm. And I think coming from where they were since 1990, they've not actually done a better calculation of their growth, their real strength in terms of world global development and then on the African continent. So they were second to South Africa. And a lot of development have gone on in Nigeria since 1990, which were not captured in India and their GDP. Talking about the movie industry, for instance, which has actually grown over a period, and now it's involved a lot of people who are engaged in the movie industry in Nigeria. So with that one coming on board, you see the economy will move forward. You have other sectors like the airline sector, for instance. Nigeria since after 1990, we have only one airline in Nigeria, but then now they have other airlines coming on board. And then we talk about the banking sector, for instance. We look across Africa. Nigeria have the most influential banking sector in Africa, because you look at Ghanaian banks, 70-60% are from Nigeria. You see the major takeovers and major acquisition happening in the country where all banks from Nigeria. So on that sector also coming on board, you see the economy will move forward. So what they actually did was that they have now included all the other sectors which have developed since 1990 into the economy. So now they've risen to become the number one country in Africa in terms of GDP. But when you should ask me if it's better off to live in South Africa or to live in Nigeria, I would say it's better off to live in South Africa than to live in Nigeria, because GDP is not just about the numbers, it's about the effect of the GDP on the lives of the people.
That's right.
You look at GDP per capita, which is the measure of how people are living, the living standard of the people. South Africa is in the region of over $7,000 per head. That's when we share the GDP among the citizens.
That's right.
And go to Nigeria, it's still around 2,000 something, even after the rebasing. So you see, it's better off to live in South Africa than to live in Nigeria. So really, before the rebasing, if you were having 10 naira in your pocket after rebasing about a week ago, the 10 naira in your pocket is not going to shoot it up to $20, 20 naira or 30 naira. It's still going to be the 10 naira. So the issues of the growth and the effect on the people. So a lot of people have issue with the numbers. All right. But some of what we do is that we pick the numbers, then we integrate it to see how realistic and how meaningful the numbers are in the lives of the people. So if you cannot make that correlation between the GDP and then the lives of the people, then it becomes a question. But it has to be something in the medium to the long term. That's how the whole thing says. So it's good for Nigeria to be projected the largest economy in Africa. To them, in the medium to the long term, it's going to be good for them, because the world has to see your true picture, your true strength, so that in terms of their investment direction, investment policy, they will know that I have a market here which is very large on the whole continent. So if I put my money there, there's a possibility that I'm going to make a huge returns on this. So that's how the whole thing is to be looked at.
Okay. I think you've answered about 3 of my questions. I'm actually answering that one. Now, how will this have an effect on surrounding countries of Nigeria, such as ourselves?
Yeah, I think I must say that the world Africa has got the imagination of the world, where in the 1960s, 1970s, when people think of Africa, they think of a continent where you see children with barefooted,
living in mud huts and trees,
belly with flies around their mouth, diseases, very dark continent. 6:30 p.m. you can walk across many countries in Africa. So you can think of the conflict that were happening across many countries. In the 1960s, 1970s, about 36 countries out of the 51, 52 countries in Africa were in crisis in terms of political conflict here and there. But I think in the turn of the century, the story is different now. We see a lot of countries moving up democratically. It's been growing very strongly on the continent. You see economic growth where some countries are growing double digits. Ghana did that in 2011. You go to Angola, they've been doing double digit growth for the past 10 years. and then other countries as well. So you see Ethiopia, there's lots of manufacturing going on there. The shoe manufacturing is taking over in Ethiopia now. And go to Kenya, you see the ICT revolution happening from Ethiopia. You go to South Africa, you see a lot of the grocery chain happening and then moving across the continent. So there are positive numbers coming up, and then this coming on board is good as well, because what it does is that now you position us in the global economy. See that there's a massive capacity in this part of the region as well.
Yes.
Okay. Whilst at first they thought that this is not a place where people can live, where people can exist, where people can realize their dreams. Now the story is different. Starting from what we've seen from Nigeria now.
Yeah.
Now when you come to this part of the world, we are showing our potential. We have the capacity. Population, we are growing faster than any other region, which in itself might be a problem. But then we look at the economic side of it. If you're able to position our population rate strategically, it's good for us, because we have a larger consumer market. It means that whatever you produce in this part of the world, you have the market for people to buy whatever you produce. Yeah. So all these numbers coming together, I think it is good for us, projecting us to the global economy, that indeed this part of the world, we have the capacity, we have the strength. Like Nigeria has done, Ghana is the same, Cote d'Ivoire the same. Okay, Cote d'Ivoire is now growing around 8%, even after just 2011 crisis. Ghana is growing around 6% to 7% on the average. So it's good. I mean, it's having effect on us in terms of being able to attract foreign direct investment in this part of the world.
Okay. Now, Ghana will always refer to as the gateway to Africa. Obviously, with our recent economic struggles and slight knockdown in regards to investment, foreign investment. With Nigeria putting themselves in such a position, can we still consider ourselves the gateway to Africa? Because I even heard one Nigerian person say that you might be the gateway, but Nigeria is where it all ends.
Yeah, the destination of Africa. I mean, it's something that we need to interrogate properly. It's good that we can be the gateway of Africa, but we must make sure that we're able to maintain some of the very things that we think must pass through our system to get to other market. Okay, that's what we call the economic leverage. Now, what most countries in Africa are not doing is that most of them have not been able to identify the very thing that they can leverage on to attract and then develop to the level that they want to get to.
Yes.
Okay. When you take, I always use the example of Switzerland, for instance. Switzerland is, as you say, maybe the gateway to Europe as well.
Yeah.
And what they did was that now Switzerland is a small country, but it's hosting the billions of dollars and the pounds across the world is being sent to Switzerland to develop their financial sector, make it strong, to be able to attract global money. Okay, so whatever money that is circulating in America and circulating in Europe
still ends
must go through Switzerland.
Yeah.
So that is a leverage. Okay, so if you look at across Africa, let's just Ghana example, as we would like to use Ghana example. We have a strong democratic credential. That's why most companies, most nationals want to establish their hub in Ghana, go through Ghana and get to other markets in the region. This is our economic leverage. So we must make sure that now we have a strong democracy across the continent. This is something that we can leverage on as it's been attracted to the world. This is something we can leverage on. So what are the positive directions in terms of being able to drive investment to this part of the world? So that it will not be like they just come here, use our route and get to the other market.
Yeah.
That's not going to help us.
We need to ensure that we retain
some of the very things that pass through our system to the other markets.
Okay. So what are the things that we should be looking forward to now, considering that a West African country has been put at the top of the...
I think before I come to that, I want to say something on the Nigeria being the largest economy. Like I said, it's not always about the numbers. The numbers must have meaning in the lives of the people. Nigeria have a lot of challenges, which most of the challenges are across most countries in Africa. We talk about unemployment being very, very high in Nigeria. We saw what happened in the stadium where about 1,000 or 3,000 jobs opening. We're opening the civil, the aviation something, and then most of people went to the stadium, and then a lot of people died as a result. Yeah. So unemployment is very, very high. And then you look at Nigeria, to have high rate of inequality, economic inequality, which is a recipe for social unrest, which will then become economic problem.
That's right.
Because if you realize that when the growth is coming, it is good, but the inclusion of the growth is very, very important. If a lot of people are left out when you talk about economic growth and economic transformation, then you have a challenge. If the growth is being suspended by just the top 1%, you see, all of us are working together.
That's right.
To increase the national cake. All right. And a few people are also working very hard to increase their share of the national cake. That becomes a problem.
So it further increases the divide between the rich and
the poor. So that gap is widening.
Yeah.
Day in and day out, which is a very, very critical thing that we must look at across many countries. When it happens like that, it causes social unrest, which becomes economic problem. And then it should be a recycling. So you never see the development happening. you see what's happening. I mean, insurgency in the northeast of Nigeria, the Boko Haram issue. These are all critical challenges that the Nigerian economy, the Nigerian government must look at to be able to make sure that now this we being the number one, we being the light, we showing our potential. That indeed, when we come to this part of the world, we have the capacity to contain, we have the capacity to grow, we have the capacity to reduce poverty across the world. So I think those are the things that we must look at going forward.
Okay. Now, in regards to Nigeria's status as it is now, what should they be doing to maintain that status as being the top economy?
First of all,
obviously there are other emerging economies which could potentially knock them off.
Sure.
If need be.
I think Nigeria is doing quite well in terms of global economic positioning, because Nigeria has been now associated with the mint nation. We have the BRICS, with the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now there's new one which is coming up, which is called the mint nation. You have the Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey. Has been the new emerging economies in terms of they are fronting the emerging economies. So many emerging economies. And now as it stands now, 90% of the world's population are now in the emerging economy. So the developed economies are just forming 10% of the global population. So the potential is there, the capacity is there. Now look across the continent, the wind that we are seeing, a lot of people are talking about Africa rising middle class, youth population being a very, very good tool for economic growth going forward. Look at the wind that is blowing. It's all blowing from the East Asian market, as they've been the emerging market, because they've now started their own revolution, industrialization. Now they started with the light manufacturing, they moved to manufacturing of big machinery, like what's happening in China, Malaysia, and the rest. They all coming. And what is happening now is that these economies are now partnering strongly with Africa. Okay, they get most of our raw material from this part of the world. So that's why we've seen a lot of these positive numbers happening across the continent after the turn of the century. Okay, but then going forward, it's good we are seeing the potential now. So what I say is that now Africa is rising. Okay, but when integrate very well, you see that we are not really rising as people perceive us to be. But it's good, the potential is there. I like the optimism. Going forward, what I see is that a lot of countries are going to move up the economic development ladder. I mean, going forward, but it has to be strategically done. Look at, you go to China, for instance. China was having the cheap labor market in the world. So because of that, the multinationals, which are moving from the developed countries where labor costs were very, very high, they had to move their hub to China. And what China did to be able to absorb this opportunity was to consciously train the labor, which is very, very cheap there. So that even though we know the labor is cheap, the labor cost is cheap in China, we're not just coming there because it's cheap. We know that the skill there is quality as well. Okay, so that's what they did. So they're able to contain, able to attract and then maintain those opportunities that were coming from the developed market. Okay, and this wind has started blowing in this part of the world. So Ghana, we have a youth population, and then we are now being positioned as being the next market to really rise in terms of development across the world. So what we need to do now, as you asked, is that we need to consciously position our labor market in a position where we'll be able to attract some of this investment that are happening across the country, across the world,
and put some of our youth to work.
Exactly. So when the skills are developed, market is ready, then we're able to attract, because you are cheap. I mean, there's no way I should go and establish an assembly plant in US where I'll pay $2,000, $5,000 a month, where I can get $500 a month in Ghana. So it's not just me paying $500 in Ghana. They can do the same job as the person in America can do. So that's the whole concept about development, and the wind blowing in this part of the world has been emerging market, Africa rising, African style, and all those things happening. It's just it's good, but then we have to go deeper into it and see where we're able to position ourselves to make sure that as we attract them, we're able to maintain them.
It as well.
And that's what we call the spider of economics.
All right. Well, thank you ever so much. This has been Mr. Paul Frimpong, African Affairs Analyst and Emerging Market Strategist. And thank you for educating us a lot more on this particular topic. We've been talking about the rebased economy of the Nigerians being put at number one in the largest economies within Africa. Anyway, that is the end of the business segment, brought to you by Peak Milk. We'll be back in just a few moments.